All right, everyone, continuing with our FI household series, Brad is chatting with Martin and Aisha, and the question today is, should I pay off my mortgage as part of my financial independence plan? Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to ChooseFI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. ChooseFI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, Martin and Aisha, welcome to ChooseFI, and thank you guys so much for being part of our Households of FI.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this should be great. So let's refresh everybody's memory. Obviously, we introduced you guys back in our Households of FI episode. I think it was 224. But yeah, just give us a sense of who you guys are and how you found FI.
So Aisha and I have been married for about 14 years now. And as I said in that earlier episode, we are typically natural savers. We put away money initially once we are paid in investments. And late last year, we were looking for ways to maximize our investments and prepare for our retirement. And we were looking to find ways to utilize dividend funds. We heard about dividend funds, and I was looking on the ChooseFI podcast and stumbled across an episode about the Roth conversion. And let me tell you, we've met with numerous personal finance investors, and we'd heard the concept before, but it always seemed mysterious. But the way that you all explained it, it seemed very clear.
Nice.
It seemed that we could use that strategy. I was pretty much hooked. So I sent the email to Aisha and told her about the episode, and we've just been listening ever since. And it just seemed to match with our values and our goals of wanting to optimize our life and become financially independent.
Yeah, that is a mind-blowing concept when you see it. I think we did a couple of case studies on it. I'm sure that's what you're referencing, and we'll put that in the show notes. I don't remember the exact number offhand, but yeah, when you hear it laid out, you're like, wow, I can actually do that and pay virtually $0 in tax potentially on all this money I put into my traditional 401k. So yeah, that is a super, super cool thing. So Aisha, you guys are natural savers.
Yeah, so I feel like, Martin and I have been married for about 14 years, and we've always pretty much lived below our means, but we didn't really have a set plan. We would just kind of save just because you're supposed to save. And initially, we were probably saving about 25% of our income. And we thought, we were doing great. And we always knew that we wanted to retire, but we didn't have a truly set out step-by-step how we're going to kind of get there. And then I think it was probably last October when he stumbled across the podcast, and we were literally like, oh my God, this is great. This is what we've been looking for. Numbers, an actual number, a financial independent number to strive for. It seemed obtainable. And so, that's kind of what kind of really pushed us to really commit and make some bigger changes. We got rid of cable. We changed our cell service. We looked at our insurances to see where we could save there and really try to optimize the amount that we were saving.
Yeah, that's cool. First, I want to say you didn't think you were doing great. You were legitimately doing great. Give yourself some credit here, right? Compared to even people who are, I'm saving for retirement, right? If most people are saving 10% for retirement and you guys had a savings rate of 25% without even ever having heard of FI or anything, that is remarkable. So please, please, please don't beat yourself up. And I think the extension of that is for listeners out there. FI is not necessarily about you have to save 50, 60, 70% of your income. FI is about, in my estimation, it's about living a better life.
Yeah.
And by having financial security, that helps you get there. But it's really important that we don't beat ourselves up about only having 25% savings rate or only having even 14%, whatever it may be. Like, it's just about living a better life. So yeah, kudos to you guys. And I think also what you said in there was having some certainty, right? With that FI number. And I was saying this before we hit record, like when I heard your guys' story, like it just resonated with me personally because it sounded like a very similar life path to what my wife and I are living, right? And we did find FI a little bit earlier in our lives, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, but almost identical, right? Like we have 2 kids about the same age. We've been married almost the exact same amount of time, natural savers. Like it's super, super cool. And for me, that actually was a big moment also, is finding that concept of, okay, there's a number out there and I have control over that number, right? It's not, oh, I was listening to Susie Orman and she says I need $15 million to retire, right? Like you stick your head in the sand when you hear that and you run away because who could get there? But FI, and I guess the 4% rule of thumb means it's based off of your expenses. So you have control over that, which is an amazing thing. So yeah, super cool that you guys, that was an inflection point for you as well. And it sounds like you got right to action as well. And like, what I want to hear about is, okay, Martin sends you this podcast and this concept of the Roth IRA conversion. And, it's this aha moment for him. Did you guys have conversations? Like what did those first couple of days or weeks look like after, oh my God, we've found FI? Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, for me, I was excited, but even though I feel like I'm a natural saver, my gut reaction to a budget is resistance. I look at a budget as being restrictive. And for years, Martin has wanted us to be on a budget. Like, oh, we need to budget because we spend this money and at the end of the month, we have no idea where it's gone. Even though we're saving, our spending was still on items that weren't really tangible. So initially, I was a little bit skeptical because I'm like, oh no, here comes a budget. And I don't like itemizing things. It feels meticulous and micromanaging. I just don't. I like to feel like kind of free and fluid. And that's more so like the way my personality goes. However, when we were kind of discussing it, we did discuss having a budget, but it was under the guise of let's see what we're spending. Let's see what we truly, not that we're not going to spend, but we're just going to focus on spending where we truly find value. So for me, that spoke to me because it's like, okay, so we're not necessarily just stopping all spending. We're just going to kind of shift and make sure our money is directed in areas that truly speak to us, where we truly find like happiness. And I was like, I could get behind that 100%.
In addition to that, what we did was we were aware of personal capital. And I think that's a tool you guys reference often. And we decided to actually put all of our information in personal capital and use that to track all of our expenses, all of our income, and all of our accounts in a way that's less obtrusive. So we didn't have to sit down every week and discuss how much money you spent. We didn't have to limit our spending per se. The first thing we did was enter our information in personal capital to really get a clear picture of what was coming in, what was going out.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it sounds like instead of budgeting, it sounds like this was just cataloging, like, right? You were trying to get a sense of where you are. And yeah, personal capital is a great tool. We've talked about that for years on ChooseFI, and that is a free tool for people to sign up for. So since you've mentioned it a couple of times, I'll say you can sign up for it at ChooseFI.com/PC for personal capital. So ChooseFI.com/PC. But that value conversation, what does that look like? So, it's easy, and that's terminology that I use. I love looking at it through that lens of value because it doesn't feel like deprivation then. You're not depriving yourself. You're flipping that on its head. It's, hey, I want to get to FI, and we might have even a preferred amount of time, right? Like I think you guys said something like, I've heard 5, 7, 10 years. I think 7 to 10 years is the rough timeline. But you don't want to be miserable, right? Like you don't want to wish away those years, obviously, just to get to this mythical FI. So there's always a give and take between you have to spend money. Spending money is not a bad thing. It really isn't. But it comes down to that value proposition of, hey, we might spend money on this. And for us, it's our daughters love to swim. And the swimming program they're in is very, very expensive. but we spend that gladly. But yet we don't like to go out to eat all that much. Sure, maybe once or twice a month. And we don't love to spend money on cable. So that's $100 a month that's gone, right? So it's not about total dollars in and total dollars out. It's value. And I'd love to hear how you guys thought through that.
Well, one of the things that we've always known is that we really truly value our experiences. Even at a young age when we were together, we would travel. We have reward cards, we have a Shell vacation timeshare that we use quite often. So we really value our experiences, and we have a great community here in Chicago. So we spend a lot of time with friends, spend a lot of time with family. We're fortunate enough to have both of our families here in Chicago with us. So travel, spending time with friends, and then being healthy. You mentioned groceries and restaurants, and we realized that we can spend time with family and friends without necessarily going out to a restaurant and spending over $100, $200. So we looked at how we could still have those same experiences, just in a wiser way. So one of the things we did was we started potlucks. Aisha came up with a brilliant idea of inviting her family over how often was it? Once a month. And we would come over and we would potluck. And they would bring food and we would spend, hours at a time and talk about goals. And then we just adopted that and started doing it with my family as well. And then later, our friends. So that was one way that we saw value in our experiences and going about that in a little bit of a smarter way.
I love that. Oh, that's really cool. What a great idea. We have not yet done the potlucks, but I feel like that's something that just would be cool because everybody brings their favorite dish, right? You're trying brand new stuff. It is an experience, but yet for a 50th of the price, basically, right? And yeah, it's fun. I think to me, that's one of the best aspects of FI is that it's almost like you're winning at life in some weird little, like you come up with these ways to just get maybe the same experience, or in this case, probably better, frankly, right? You don't have to drive out to a restaurant and get parking and, wait for your table and pay $100 or $200. Like you're doing this from the confines of your house. Nobody's rushing you out. Mm-hmm. And you get to try a whole bunch of different dinners. Like to me, that is truly winning. And yet you're doing it again for a tiny, tiny little fraction of the cost. So yeah, that's super, super cool.
Something else we ran across recently is a website. It's Budget Bites. And I literally fell in love with this website because it gives you so many different options. They're completely affordable. And then you also have the option of, if you perchance have a lot of broccoli or cauliflower, you can type that ingredient in and then they'll give you recipes for that ingredient. So I found that was super useful. It allowed us to literally make our refrigerator so efficient, whereas at the beginning of the week it's full and at the end of the week it's completely empty. Nothing's going to waste. Wow. And I just love that. I hate wasting food. So this efficiency with the ingredients and using up whatever you have left. And we would make a menu and then just shop based off of what's on the menu. I feel like that was probably the most recent little life hack that I thought was just genius. I love it. Absolutely adore this website.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know my wife Laura definitely likes Budget Bites. I've heard her reference that many a time. I think even on the cookbook that she has on our ChooseFI site, I think at choosefi.com/meals, a bunch of them are from Budget Bites. So the original version of it was from Budget Bites. So yeah, that's a great site. And do you have any sense of how much money you guys have saved on your grocery bill since kind of finding FI or that website in particular?
I don't know. I can't recall what we used to spend on groceries. I know now we're right about $600 on groceries and a month. And then we give ourselves about a $100, $150 just eating out budget a month.
And that's for a family of 4.
Yep.
Yes.
Nice. Oh, that's amazing. That's really amazing. Yeah, I think so many people just kind of, we spend $1,500 on food. I hear that number thrown around. I know it's completely arbitrary and anecdotal, of course, but between going out, how many, like you said, you spend $50, $100, $200 sometimes when you go out. And a lot of people just kind of graze when they go to the grocery store, or even worse, it's they don't plan right? So it's, oh, I'm just going to go quickly pick up X, Y, and Z, right? I'm going to go to the hot buffet bar at the local grocery store for $12 a pound. And sure, it's maybe easy. You could even argue that, right? Because it's 25 minutes each time round trip. But at $12 a pound, that adds up pretty darn quick. So yeah, I think for a lot of people, food is a major, major aspect where they can save a boatload of money. So actually, one thing I wanted to chat about, Aisha, was on the video you sent in, you talked about that you're a dentist and that obviously because of the lockdown and quarantine that the dental office has been closed since mid-March. I'm not sure if at the time of recording in late August, if it's reopened yet or not, but you described this as a blessing in disguise. And I think, there's so much negativity just around in life. And I know we hear people grumbling about school and what's going to happen. Is it going to be horrible? Like all these just negative things. And to hear something like that, a blessing in disguise, like that just like filled me with joy, frankly. And I'd love to hear you guys talk about that. Like, what has that been to you and your family?
Well, so because of the quarantine, I was out of work for 4 months. So during that time, we were able to, I had so much time. So we were able to really dive into the weeds of what we're spending. And we looked at our cell phone bill and we changed cell phone carriers. We looked at our home insurance, our auto insurance, and changed plans almost immediately. And we were able to literally save $500 immediately. And everything is it was amazing that we were getting the exact same thing, but for so much less, to the point where I was like, wow, we could have done this a long time ago. But it's just a matter of taking the time to do it, because it can be time consuming, calling around, looking at rates, making sure you're getting the same coverage as you had before. So in that sense, I felt like it was a blessing. And then just the time with the family. We were able to spend so much time as a family, bike rides, walks, games of hide and go seek, board games, you name it. And I feel like for our children, it was so valuable. Even now they speak to you, oh yeah, when mom was off work, that was great. We did all of these things because I had so much time. And even in regular life, I only worked 3 days a week, but those other 2 days, it's typically spent doing stuff, going places. But with COVID and everything being closed, we just had a lot of truly valuable, irreplaceable time together, camping in the backyard. All of these things that we always say we were going to do, but just never have time to do, we were able to do, along with kind of just really figuring out what truly matters to us and what we truly find joy in. And that was eye-opening, because pre-COVID, we were the go, 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 constantly tons of activities. Our schedule would be completely booked, just this constant sense of rush. So it was just amazing to be able to just literally slow everything down and just eat all 3 meals together, because Martin was working from home. So, since they were toddlers, was the last time we probably ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner together as a family. That just wasn't something that we were afforded because of our work schedule and their schedule. So for all of those reasons, I just feel like it was truly a blessing. It gave us a chance to pause and really evaluate things, and then to bring some of that into our lives, even once things open up. Because my idea is I'm never going back to that. I'm never going back to that rush, 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 go, 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 completely overscheduled, all of us, completely overscheduled. So for me, it's wow, I don't know if I would have come to that realization without being forced into it.
Yeah, that's incredible. And yeah, I like how you updated that from blessing in disguise to just straight blessing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. That's how we look at it as a family as well. And I think this is another kind of cool thing about FI is it allows you to really lock in on what's important. And now I would say that just as a general overarching principle of FI, but especially in this time, right? This has been the most clarifying time. Obviously, none of us would have wished this on anyone, clearly. So let's obviously get that out of the way. But But this has been extremely clarifying for all of us in that, hey, we are essentially locked in as a family. And like, what do we enjoy doing? How do we want to spend our hours and our days? And it's cool that you guys actually did all these things, the camping in the backyard and the playing games. And, it's, hey, someday. And I think a lot of us keep busy because, especially with kids, we think we're doing the best for them, right? Like we're putting them in piano and soccer and swimming and this and that. And it sounds wonderful, right? You're giving them opportunities, but sometimes they just want to spend time with mom and dad or ride their bikes around the neighborhood with their friends. And yeah, it's interesting because my kids have said that the 3 weeks we spent visiting their grandparents, that was the single best vacation they've ever had in their entire lives. Like it beat Hawaii, it beat Alaska, which we were going to go to. And, just sitting there hanging out with their cousins and their grandparents. And it's a cool thing. So yeah, I absolutely love that's helped you. And it's so interesting to me that this happened for you guys in the same year that you found FI, right? Because it's all kind of coalescing. And, again, I'm putting this caveat in, clearly nobody would wish for COVID or the lockdowns or anything. But when put together, you guys found the concept of financial independence in January of 2020. And, you started getting some of that clarity, and then it moves into this. And sorry, Martin, for keep on asking Aisha questions, but you said you would never go back. And I know you said that was in reference to the overscheduling, but I'm curious, like, how will this impact, and this is for both of you guys, like, how will this impact your jobs potentially and how you look at your jobs over the next 7 to 10 years while you're on this path to FI? Like, have you thought about, hey, I'm going to go back to full time or my 3 days a week or whatever it may be?
Well, as of right now, I am back to the 3 days. And it's so funny because prior to COVID, if you would have asked me, it's like, oh, I love my job. Like, oh, I'm not stressed. I love my job. Then post COVID, it's like, my job actually does cause some stress. Like I've had a couple of like revelations, sometimes it was the stress of work that would make me want to purchase and buy things. And once that stress was removed, I didn't feel this desire to make these purchases. So that was just like a little personal kind of revelation. I look at work differently now. It's not quite as enjoyable because I feel like while I'm working, I'm missing out on these other opportunities as far as like the time with the family, the time with the children that I didn't really think about as much before. So for me, it has kind of strengthened my conviction. Like, yeah, I want this to literally like 5 years. Like I want to be able to just kind of be done in 5 years or maybe work 1 day a week, or maybe 2, but probably more like 1, because I'm just realized that working just takes up so much time. And when you can redirect it into something else that you may find a little bit more joy at this moment, that's valuable. So I don't know how it's been for you.
For me, it's been less of a transition. The largest transition for me was commuting to working from home. And working from home during this period has allowed me to spend a lot more time with the family. I must say that I did enjoy my commute when I was commuting. I don't know if I just, made the best of a not so good situation, but there was a bit of a transition. But with that, realizing that the time that I have with Aisha, with the kids, around the house, with friends and family is most important. The 2 hours of commuting time that I literally got back with my working from home, I realized just the importance of time. And although there were some benefits of commuting, I realized that the time and then the money that I saved alone was invaluable. So my focus is on what can I use my time for that provides me with value, that makes the most of it. So getting that time back just made me realize how important it is. Every moment that I have to direct toward what I value, it just helped me realize that. So now thinking about what I would like to use my time for outside of work is something that has become a thought and a conversation with Aisha and I, more so now since we discovered FI and even more so after the quarantine has ended.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll use two words that we've mentioned in the last 20 minutes, which are clarifying and a blessing. It sounds like both of you have had these clarifying moments of, hey, what do we want our lives to look like? And it also is that blessing to be able to have the space to think about this, right? Like, how fortunate are we to have the space to do that, to even have the awareness that we can live the lives that we want, right? Like, how many people think, hey, I've got to work until I'm 70 and maybe I'll be able to retire. So guys, this is absolutely incredible. And I will now turn it over to you. This is obviously the whole concept here. And I really, your story is incredible. And that's why I really wanted to dive into it. But the whole concept of this Households of FI is we're going to be following you along this path. And it sounds like, you guys have made just incredible strides just in the first 7 or 8 months that you've found FI. So I see a very significant success story here, even if I don't say a word or none of us say a word. You guys are rocking and rolling, right? But, where are you? What questions do you have? I think, the last time you sent in, you had expenses of about $3,500 a month. It sounds like that's gone down from what I'm possibly hearing, though I'm not sure.
No, it's about that. It's about the 3,500. Actually,
Nice.
Life is bumpy, so it's a swing. 3,500 to 5,000 a month is about where we are with expenses, just depending on any and everything that can come up, like a new stove, a fence that needs to be repaired. Just typically it's, something with the house.
Yeah.
But
funny how that works, right?
but yeah, everything baseline, everything's rolling smoothly. We're about 3,500 as long as there's no hiccups. So yeah, that's about where we are.
And agreed. Life is extraordinarily lumpy. I see that every single time I look at my credit card bill. I'm like, oh man, I have this baseline perfect world in my head, and it is never there. So I think that's an affliction of just life. So, but yeah, like I said, I certainly want to turn it over to you guys now. So, what questions? I can't promise I'm going to have all the answers, but that's the cool thing about what we're all doing here is we're working together as a community. So anything that we leave open now, we can discuss in the future. We can bring on experts. I think that, again, is the whole point of what we're doing here is so many people are going to see themselves in you, and they're getting their own path started. They might be 2 months in or 2 years in, but they can see themselves in you. So any questions that you guys have, regardless of whether, dopey old me can answer them right now, right? Like, that's irrelevant. It's let's look at this path and see, how do we all get there together?
We're looking at 7 years. I know we threw out a couple numbers, 5, 7, 10 years. I think 7 years is probably a solid number that we're looking at. And what we have is a couple of different options, and we would like some assistance in helping us evaluate which of those options would put us in the best situation, or our outcome would be the best in 7 years. So we have 3 options. One of those options would be to take money from an investment account that we have and pay off the loan of our house. That would be the last expense that we have, and that would allow us to then take the money that we're paying toward our mortgage and invest that for 7 years. That would be option 1.
Okay.
Option 2 would be to take half of our remaining loan balance for the mortgage from that investment account, put that toward the mortgage, and then pay the same amount for the mortgage payment for 7 years, which would essentially pay off that entire mortgage, investing about $4,500 per month. We're assuming that the money that we will be investing would be earning an average of 7%, just to make it easy.
Okay.
And then the last option 3, would be to refinance our current mortgage to about 1 point?
A little less than 1%.
A little less than 1%
than what we have
change.
right now. So right now our interest rate is 3.6.
Okay.
And we would be able to refinance our current interest rate is 3.3, and we would be able to refinance to 2.6. So it's not a full point difference. So we weren't sure if it would be worth it to refinance, coupled with there was, I think, about a $7,000 fee to refinance,
Wow.
which I thought was high, or to me, that seemed kind of high. And then we would continue to invest the same way that we have been. And with the refinance, it would keep the payment the same, but it would cut 2 years off of the remaining amount. So right now we have 17 more years. So if we were to refinance, it would be brought down to 15 more years, but the payment stays the same and the interest rate is a little lower.
Gotcha. So I guess my first question is just more of a theoretical one, is how important to you guys psychologically is it to have your mortgage paid off in this FI concept? So 7 years is what we're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it absolutely essential for you to pay off your mortgage, like psychologically? So let's even put the math aside. Like in your heart of hearts, like what have you guys discussed about that? Like, would you consider yourself at FI if you still had a mortgage? I mean, there are some people who wouldn't. They don't feel comfortable with mortgages. Like, where do you come down on that?
I personally like the concept of having the house paid off. I know that the numbers may or may not support that, but I like the concept of not having a mortgage. I feel with that, just having our expenses be substantially lowered. It's about $1,600 for just principal and interest. So to have $1,600 less that we are responsible for a month is just something that I feel more comfortable with. Like I like the concept, but I don't want to do it if the numbers doesn't support it. But psychologically, I like that idea.
Yeah, I think that when I envision, I keep coming back to the 7 years, but when I envision us in 7 years, I would feel much better if we did not have a mortgage at that point, even if our net worth or what we had in our investment accounts would be significantly lower. For me, it's almost goes back to choice. And to some degree, it feels like when we have a mortgage, there's no choice. We have to work. And if our mortgage was paid, then we'd have more options, is the way that I see it.
Yeah, no, that certainly makes sense. And the reason why I wanted to really kind of slow down on this is, I love your 3 different options and, it's very well thought out. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, and I struggle with this, a lot of people in the FI community struggle with this. So you are in very, very good company because we're all just trying to figure out what works best for our own lives. And I think we've talked about this a lot on the show that most likely, or almost certainly, the mathematically optimal way would be, especially when we're talking 3.3% interest or maybe potentially 2.6, like it makes almost no sense mathematically to pay that down. So we could come up with 72 different options. And I say this very lovingly because I've been there. Believe me, I still am there. So we could come up with as many options as we want mathematically to, we're going to pay off 72% of this and all this other stuff. And believe me, I've done this so many times. But at the end of the day, investing the money is going to be the better mathematical option. And I'm saying that, obviously we don't have side-by-side numbers, but I can pretty much tell you with a degree of certainty that that's going to be the case. And I think you guys know that, right? Like you've listened to enough of these podcasts and followed enough of the FI community to know that. But that doesn't mean, and this is critical, that does not mean that investing the difference is the right decision for you and your family, right? Because the psychological aspect cannot be overlooked. It just simply can't. So I think we have to, and you guys as a family and as a couple need to figure out like, how important is this? Like when, again, you both pretty much indicated that this is pretty essential to you. So it sounds like paying this thing off in the next 7 years, right? That's how I'm envisioning it, as opposed to, okay, let's pay it off today. Does that make the most sense at, when you're paying 3.3% interest and forget where the market is or any of that stuff? Let's just assume in normal times, like if we're assuming your FI date is 7 years away, does it make sense to pay it off today with money that's invested otherwise? Probably not. But what would a 7-year path look like to pay this thing off? It might very simply be like you can run an amortization calculator on this on pretty much any website. There, just Google mortgage amortization and you can put in, hey, we're going to pay this amount extra per month, $300, $500, $700, whatever it may be. And just figure it out until the payoff date is 7 years from now, right? Or whatever the number is, and just see what that number is. And then see, hey, does that fit into our lifestyle? Like, again, because psychologically, it is important to you to pay this off. So according to your voicemail and all the info you've given, like your guys' savings rate now especially is over 50%. So clearly there's a gap there, right? You're putting money into savings, you're putting money into 401k. If you make the decision that, okay, it is essential for us to get rid of this thing in 7 years, we can do the math on that very easy on that amortization calculator. And okay, instead of diverting that to additional savings, let's just divert it to the mortgage because this is critical for us. And I think that's a very reasonable position to take. And then, at the end of this, $1,600 a month is gone, plus that extra that you were paying.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that sounds like a slam dunk win. And then, if you had calculated, I think you said you calculated your FI number at about 1.25 million, which would suggest about $50,000 of annual expenses. So for the audience, that's just the 4% rule, or basically the inverse of that is just taking those annual expenses of 50,000 and multiplying by 25. Okay, so 50,000 times 25 is that 1.25 million. So I didn't do any brilliant calculations here to kind of figure that 50,000 was your number, right? So that's somewhere around $4,000 a month, which again ties into your life is lumpy, but $4,000 less $1,600, right? That's almost $500,000 out of that 1.25 million that you don't need anymore to be at FI, which is pretty darn good, right? Like your FI number all of a sudden looks a lot more like 750,000 as opposed to 1.25 million. So, I mean, when I'm talking about this, and the cool thing, this is just as if we were sitting on my front porch having coffee. Like, this is not me as an expert. This is just us having conversation. And this is what FI is about. It isn't about the mathematically optimal thing for a lot of us. For many people in the FI community, it is, but it sounds like our families are similar in that, like, we're wrestling with what's best psychologically. So when I said that about hey, let's just go to the amortization schedule, like, does that sound like a reasonable, maybe fourth option on the list?
No, that definitely does. I feel like that's completely doable to figure out what the payment would need to be in order for it to be paid off in 7 years. I think that sounds like a great fourth option. And I think it's something that we could be comfortable with, because I do feel like once I'm no longer working, I believe I'll feel more comfortable if the home is paid off. Even though, I trust the market, I trust the 4% rate, I trust that, but I just feel like, just for me to sleep at night, I just feel like I would feel more comfortable if I know that we don't have a mortgage.
Sure.
And speaking of sleeping at night, I think that one other factor that we hadn't necessarily touched upon is that we were really discussing this, considering this really heavily right before the pandemic. And the drop in the market that occurred immediately following was frightening to some degree, because we had started investing right before the housing market crashed in 2008.
Yeah.
So we have experienced a down market, and we didn't really have a plan. Like we said, we would just stash money away and everything would be fine. And then when it wasn't, we didn't really have a plan. So trying to be proactive, we were looking at this opportunity. The market has recovered. Maybe this is a time that we're certain in, the fact that we're going to live in this house. Maybe it's best to take the money out of the market and not risk another crash, and then invest it into the home. So that also contributed to the thinking behind those three options.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is very reasonable. And I think a lot of us find out a whole heck of a lot about ourselves when these things happen, right? And we obviously, like we talk about on the podcast, like, you want to have, if not a written down investor policy statement, then at least some kind of plan amongst the two of you of, hey, let's not freak out when the market goes down, right? But you have to know yourself, and you do find things out about yourself. Like, I think I probably have less risk tolerance than I would have otherwise thought, because that drop in the market, that freaked me out. I'm not going to lie. I mean, that was very, very difficult to see. And I think when saner heads prevail, you can then take a step back and say, okay, now I know a little bit more about myself, and maybe I don't want to take as much of a risk. And I think that, again, that's perfectly reasonable. And, safety, I think for a lot of us is so important, especially when we have kids, we have family, we have people relying on us, right? And I'm just looking at your numbers and saying, okay, so it looks like your monthly expenses are about $4,000 a month. If you can pay off this mortgage, your monthly expenses are down to about $2,400 a month, which is a pittance, right? And when you think about it, like Asia, I mean, you're a dentist, you can work one day a week,
Yes.
right? And almost undoubtedly, I don't want to get too private here, but almost undoubtedly covered that, right?
Yes. And I think at different points, that's what speaks to me. I feel like I could work, literally like one day a week and we'll be fine. So that's another piece of the puzzle as far as paying off the home, because it would just make our lives so much more manageable. Like, it would be a cakewalk. I could do a day's work in my sleep, and then have 6 days to do what I want to do. So I don't know. All things considered, I feel like we have to really think about it, talk it over, crunch the numbers, see what it would look like in 7 years if we were to pay it off in 7, and just kind of go from there.
Yeah. What a cool thing, right? Again, that you just never know when we talk about this kind of stuff. You never know when you guys decide a month from now that, hey, we're going to pay off the mortgage right now, and I'm going down to one day a week.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a 0% chance that happens. But again, that all these things are on the table. And I know before I found FI, I didn't even conceptualize that this life was possible. That a life where I spent it with my family and my kids, my future fictional kids at that point, was even possible. But when we realize this, the sky is the limit. We have options, and don't take any option off the table. And certainly don't just listen to me or what somebody else says on some stupid blog. This is about you and your family and what works the best. And that might be a kind of cool ChooseFI type thing of, hey, we paid off the house. We've got a bunch of money in savings still, and we're still, between the two of you, Martin, if you're still working full time, or who knows what happens there, you're still saving a boatload of money, right? Yeah. And you find out, hey, does one day a week work for me? Maybe it does, and maybe that's kind of a cool path that you may not have considered. You might have thought, even after all these revelations, these last 6 or 8 months, you might have still said, in a resigned fashion for both of you, hey, we're just going to put our heads down and work for the next 7 years. And that's still incredible.
Yeah.
Well, what if there's a better option, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like with all of this, to me, the takeaway is when you are on the path to FI, it gives you options. And I feel like there's nothing more valuable than having those options, because it feels, even going to work because you want to versus because you have to, feels different. I feel just having that sense, for me, having that sense of freedom or flexibility, or even while at work, not feeling like you have to work so hard because you have to get, make this certain amount. I think it just, for me, it feels freeing. It gives me a sense of lightness, because you don't feel so bogged down with everything. It just gives you a sense of lightness and, I don't know, freedom and options. I don't know. To me, that's what's the amazing thing about the FI life, beyond just the number on the paper. And I don't know if that's something that people get or see.
Yeah. No, I totally hear you. And I guess, kind of speaking of getting bogged down, Martin, you talked about analysis paralysis and maybe information overload. And since this really is just a conversation amongst friends, right? I would kind of counsel you, and I do want to hear, obviously, more detail about where you are getting bogged down. But hopefully in this hour of conversation, we've realized, it's not about the mathematically optimal thing. Even for the people who you would think are doing it mathematically optimal. If you've heard Brandon, the mad scientist, who I think most of us consider this special person on the Mount Rushmore of FI, who does everything perfect. He talked on episodes and on a Facebook Live that we had that he invests based on the stock price of his favorite hockey player's jersey number, and he does all these other wacky things. And this is Brandon, the mad scientist, right? Who we all think of as this perfect computer investor. So I mean, I think we all have to be a little compassionate with ourselves. I think that's really kind of what I'm jokingly getting around to here is like there's so much information and it is easy to get overloaded. And I would just say this is about living a better life. So you've found this amazing well of information and you do want to just drink it all down, right? But it doesn't have to, like, I live my life based on simplicity. Like I know there are things that I could be doing in virtually every aspect of my life, like down to the technology or lack thereof that I use, like that people would laugh at me, like laugh uncontrollably. But it's fine, like I'm just living my life. So anyway, now that I've talked for 3 minutes in a row, tell me about kind of where you are with that. And maybe that was a month or two ago and you've kind of had, a more chill moment since then.
Yeah, I think things have definitely simplified themselves with working from home. I mentioned my commute before. One of the things that contributed to my analysis paralysis is I had about a 2-hour commute to and from work. So after I discovered ChooseFI, I would listen to podcasts during those times and trying to digest all of the information, utilize all of the life hacks, find the most optimized way to, to diet or to shop or to work out. I'm all about optimization, So I'm all about doing things the most efficient way. So since COVID and the quarantine, I don't have that time any longer. But when it comes to investing with the changes in the market, I'm always questioning, always thinking, always seeking to learn more information to possibly put into place something different, something that may be better than what we're doing. And we mentioned earlier about how we were saving on a regular basis when we were younger without a plan. That's something that's really comfortable. So pushing myself out of my comfort zone, trying to stretch and pivot and learn and do things differently, just acquiring more and more information makes that a little bit challenging because my expectation of making the most optimized, efficient decision in that is kind of weighing heavily, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that definitely hits home for me personally, Martin, because my wife would be laughing because I do the exact same thing, especially when it comes to like health and fitness. And, I'm trying to take in all this information. Laura always jokes with me when like some new product shows up from Amazon, she's like, oh, what did Tim Ferriss recommend now in his weekly newsletter? I got a acupressure mat, which is like the greatest thing. I now meditate on this like acupressure mat of like these 6,000 little like, I don't know, plastic like pinpricks that it's ridiculous, like utterly ridiculous. So I say that as self-deprecatingly as possible and kind of embarrassed that I do this. But yeah, there is a lot of information. And I think at the heart of it, we're just, we are trying to live better lives. And I think that's a very laudable thing. But we do have to realize you could spend your whole life taking this information in and you would get lost, and I think, again, and I don't mean to say this ad nauseum, but we're just trying to live better lives. And for me, it's not spending 2 hours a day on my computer looking at different articles and going down Reddit rabbit holes on, financial independence or health or whatever. You can do that, but that's 2 hours that I didn't get to play board games with my kids, right? So I've personally calmed down with that a little bit, though. We'll see what wacky health thing shows up from Amazon in the next month or two. But yeah, I hear you. And I think, again, a lot of this is that self-compassion. And we're finding a lot of these themes here. It's like, it's hard to look at your life sometimes and like the good and the bad, in that sense of like, I'm ostensibly trying to do something good by getting better at my life and optimizing, but you can over-optimize and lose the joy. So, I think that's where a lot of these things we're talking about, like potlucks. I love that. And I think that's something like I would genuinely love. And maybe when Laura listens to this episode, like, this will spur us on to actually have potlucks, because like that just seems like a joyful occasion to me. You have family, you have friends, and, in a perfect world, obviously, maybe when we're out of this lockdown, you can have people bring over their favorite thing. And that's just hours of entertainment. Like that's really, really cool. As opposed to the optimization of, oh, what's the best restaurant in Richmond, Virginia, or the hottest new thing in Chicago? Like, that to me at my point in life, that seems like an energy suck as opposed to something that's energy filling. like that potluck. So yeah, you can tell I'm super jazzed up about that in particular. So guys, we've obviously we've been talking for a while now, and any other kind of questions that we want to discuss now, or kind of leave it for, hey, this is what we're thinking of. This is where, we want to talk about our lives and amongst yourselves, obviously, over the next X number of months, and we can check back in on, or where do you want to go? Anything else you had for me today?
Not so much. One of the things that we are looking into is our children's education. And I'm really fortunate that we found the site. A lot of the resources that you guys have posted, the simple startup, we've looked into just exposing our children to those opportunities. But in looking at funding their college education, we listened to a couple of Facebook Lives, and with your children being of similar age, just wondering if there were any other ideas you had about funding your children's education, not necessarily, 529s or other investment tools, but just in general, we're trying to figure out ways to set that money aside for them, for their life, or, for their college education.
Yeah, I think this is something that's on a lot of our minds. And so my oldest daughter is going into 7th grade now. It sounds like your oldest is somewhere in that vicinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much disruption right now in the higher education landscape that it's really hard to know. And maybe, frankly, this is wishful thinking on my part, that the system is gonna blow up in the next 5 years and we won't have to deal with this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that this is something where I don't have a good answer. And I think I would love to kind of go back and forth with this with you guys over the next months and years of what we're thinking at the moment. Because honestly, it does change. I mean, there were times where we were putting money into a 529 pretty aggressively, I would say. And we are at the point now where we put in 0 to 529. So I think at this point, it seems pretty unpalatable for our family to consider paying a $50,000 a year at college for certainly for both kids. I mean, for either, both, any, there's no world where I could see that happening. So, I think one thing that we've done is really talk to our kids, and we've normalized the conversation around money in our house. And, my parents never talked to me about money, certainly, but we didn't want to repeat that with our kids. We want to bring them in. And we've talked to them certainly about college and about scholarships. And we don't really build up to them that, oh, it's the be all end all to get into an Ivy League school or anything like that. Like, there's so many families, middle or upper middle class families like ours, that do that. And obviously there's a lot to be said for top tier colleges. But if they don't have that in their minds and as the be all end all success of childhood, I think it lowers a lot of stress, frankly. Like, it sets them up to not be horribly disappointed. And it also makes them open their eyes to, hey, there are ways to go to college if I see fit for very little money potentially. So I think our kids are certainly going to take a lot of the strategies that we've talked about on this show with scholarships, like you mentioned, and, just really going far and wide, and also understanding that there are lower cost options. There are community colleges that you can go to for 2 years and then go to a 4-year school and get that same degree, right? Like, again, it's similar to what we were talking about before about like FI. It's living that same life, right? It's getting that same result, but you're just doing it for so much less. Like, you talked about saving $500 a month, and like nothing changed. In this case, obviously, they're not getting the 4-year college experience and all that stuff, but they're still getting 2 years of that, and they're getting the same degree, which is all that matters. This is just signaling that you have this degree, and it's essentially half price. So that's an option. Again, scholarships are an option. Like, maybe not even going to college is an option. Who knows, frankly. But like, I think for me, I didn't want to get down the path of let's lock this in as this is the be all end all. So again, this is very, very personal for our family. And I would not obviously mean to impose my opinions or beliefs on you and your family. But I think just us having the conversation with our kids early and often, I think that has helped. So that's kind of where we are right now, is we just don't know. There's so much uncertainty that, like, while putting money into a 529 is not an irrevocable thing, right? Like you can get the money out, you can pay, whatever penalty and that it is what it is. The money's not gone. So it's not like a life-changing decision to do that. But like we're at the point where there's so much uncertainty that I don't feel terribly comfortable putting additional money in the 529. So yeah, that's kind of where we are, I guess, as a family on August 28th, 2020, basically. And that could change, obviously.
Yeah. No, I feel like I personally feel similar. I'm hoping that the powers that be decide that everyone doesn't need a 4-year, $250,000 degree in order to become successful. And I feel like we're headed in the direction where maybe certain certifications and different qualifications on a shorter time span, more skill-based, so that you are hireable, or even the entrepreneur route will be maybe an option. So glad to see that, others are thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, with certifications, right? Like I know Google very recently came out with that they're going to have certifications that in their hiring process, they are going to consider that the same as having a 4-year degree. And, they haven't come out with the price yet on this, but I very strongly suspect it's going to be under $1,000 or $2,000, maybe significantly under. And that's to get a certification that Google, right? So if a leader in, world technology is going to say that, I mean, that's a big step in the right direction of, hey, maybe this 4-year degree isn't the same that it was when the three of us were at that point in our lives. So I think just kind of keeping an open mind is really critical. And this is not to denigrate higher education. I had a wonderful experience. And when it was that time for my decision, like this was the path forward, right? That was the path to the, middle-class life that I aspired to at that point. And, you just have to see life as it does change sometimes, right? Then you have to look and see what is happening in the world and kind of roll with it. So I think, like, again, that's another kind of liberating aspect of FI is you don't have to do the same path as everybody else. And like, we can also kind of see these changes coming and adapt to them from a position of financial strength and in this case, family strength as well, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, this has been amazing. I've loved getting to know you. And this is certainly the first of many of these conversations. So, we'll touch base in probably a couple months at the latest and just kind of see where you are. And obviously, it goes without saying, like, this is something we hope that you stick with us and on this path for years and years. And we'd love to have you on the podcast as often as possible. And like I was going to say, any questions you have, please keep them coming. Just jot them down, like even not just specific questions, but like topics of conversation. Like I think I looked at this as just, like I said before, an hour conversation amongst friends. And I think that's what's so cool about this is like, we're all just figuring this out together. So yeah, let's just, as ideas come up, as concepts that you want to discuss come up, we'll just bat them back and forth and we'll hit record and yeah, we'll put it on the podcast.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having us. This was great.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
I love that. An hour of conversation amongst friends. Think about the progress that can be made, the clarity that can be conveyed in just an hour. And it helps when you've actually taken some time as an individual to put your plans down on paper. And it helps even more when you can take this idea, this plan, and bounce it off other people. And that's why it's so important to do this in a community, to be a part of a community of people that are all focusing on getting to financial independence and are sharing best practices and tactics. Now, maybe you're listening to this. Maybe this is the first ChooseFI podcast that you've ever listened to and you were intrigued. You're open to the idea and you're ready to get started. Let me encourage you not to stop here, right? Maybe you're going into the weekend. Don't let this process stop with this interview. Go to ChooseFI.com/start. On this page, we've put together all the resources that we have to help serve you where you are. Get started on your path to financial independence today. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to ChooseFI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.